A man dangles from a rope on a 900-foot rock tower and doesn't come home. A coal valley disappears under 130 million gallons of black water in under 3 hours. A bridge packed with Christmas shoppers folds like a deck of cards into a freezing river during rush hour. A tunnel fills with dust so thick that workers say they could chew the air, and thousands of men never leave that mountain alive. A caver reaches into the dark for one more passage and gets pinned by a rock that weighs less than a bag of dog food. 17 places across the Appalachian Mountains where the land itself, the water, the rock, and sometimes the people who built on top of it, turned deadly. Every single story in this video is real, documented, and on the public record. Before we start climbing down this list, hit subscribe, because Appalachia has more of these stories than any one video could ever hold. And we tell a new one every week. And do me a favor, drop where you're watching from in the comments. Something tells me a few of you live 5 minutes from one of these places, and I want to hear whether we got it right, or whether the locals think we're going soft on just how dangerous it really is. Let's start at the bottom of the list and work our way up. Number 17. Amicalola Falls, Georgia. The name comes from a Cherokee phrase meaning tumbling waters, and it's fitting, because this is the tallest waterfall in the state, dropping roughly 729 feet across a series of cascading tiers. It's also the gateway to the entire Appalachian Trail. Hikers walk right past its base on the 8-mile approach trail to Springer Mountain, the trail's southern starting point. Giddy with adventure before they've logged a single official mile north. The falls themselves are lined with several hundred stairs, and even that manufactured. Guardrailed climb has sent visitors to the hospital when whetstone meets worn-out sneakers. In September 2020, a hiking couple wandered off the marked route near the falls. The man was rescued with back, head, and knee injuries. His girlfriend was found dead below. The mountain doesn't know you're a beginner on day one. It only knows you left the trail. Number 16. Devil's Bathtub, Virginia. Tucked into the Jefferson National Forest, this small emerald plunge pool, barely 20 feet long and 12 feet deep, looks like a postcard. And reaching it means crossing the same creek more than a dozen times on narrow, slick ledges. Virginia's own tourism office labels the trail difficult and warns it isn't suitable for children under 10. And rangers tell visitors plainly that once water reaches your shins at the first crossing, you turn around. In May 2020, heavy rain turned that creek into a trap, and 20 hikers, including children, were stranded overnight as rising water cut off every escape route. It took search and rescue teams, including a statewide task force, roughly 15 hours to bring everyone out safely. Most of them treated only for mild hypothermia. The bathtub itself isn't the danger. The 13 crossings on either side of it are. Number 15. Dolly Sod's Wilderness, West Virginia. This high alpine plateau, named for an 18th century German family who grazed sheep on its open meadows, feels more like Canada than Appalachia. With fog that can drop visibility to nothing, and temperature swings of 30 degrees in a single afternoon. But the real hazard here is buried. The U.S. Army trained up to 100,000 troops on this plateau for combat in the mountains of Europe, and an early cleanup sweep turned up 189 live mortar shells and 4 live artillery rounds. Follow-up sweeps using better equipment found 57 more, and hikers have kept reporting stray rounds ever since, including a Boy Scout troop that found one near a trail junction as recently as 2014. Forest Service signs still warn hikers not to touch anything metal they find in the grass. Nature reclaimed this old battlefield. It just never finished cleaning up first. Number 14. Linville Gorge, North Carolina. Locals call it the Grand Canyon of the East, and the numbers back it up. The river drops more than 2,000 feet below the rim, and outside of a single federal trail, nothing here is marked or maintained. Its name itself comes from two explorers, John and William Linville, who were killed here in 1766. Hikers vanish into the gorge every year simply by taking a wrong turn on an unmarked path with no cell signal, in terrain locals describe as making every mile feel like two, thick with rattlesnakes and copperheads hidden under the leaf litter. Then Hurricane Helene struck in 2024, and the Linville River spiked from a normal flow of under 100 cubic feet per second to more than 28,000. The gorge that swallows hikers on a quiet day rewrote its own geography in a single night. Number 13. Seneca Rocks, West Virginia. This 900-foot sandstone fin has drawn climbers since the Army trained mountain troops here during World War II, and it has claimed at least 24 lives since the 1960s. Almost all of them experienced climbers rather than tourists on the observation deck below. Even the rock formations aren't permanent. One famous pinnacle called the Gendarme simply toppled off the summit in 1987 for no apparent reason, and climbers still mourn it. On a route nicknamed Old Man's, one climber fell nearly 150 feet in a single accident decades ago after attempting the crack without a harness, a case still cited today as a lesson in exceeding your own ability. Just this past weekend, a 76-year-old veteran climber died in a fall on the east face, a sobering reminder that decades of skill buy you nothing against one wrong hold. The rock has been standing since long before climbing ropes existed. It isn't in any hurry to change its habits. Number 12. The Blue Ridge Parkway. Stretching 469 miles from Shenandoah National Park in Virginia to the Great Smoky Mountains in North Carolina, this is the most visited unit in the entire national park system. And in 2025, it also ranked as the second deadliest. The road climbs past 5,000 feet in spots like Beach Gap, where fog rolls in fast and curves tighten without warning. Most of the deaths here aren't dramatic falls. They're vehicle crashes, medical emergencies behind the wheel, motorcyclists striking deer at speed, and cyclists struck by distracted drivers admiring the view instead of the road. Federal officials have since approved $75 million for safety improvements along the corridor. America's favorite drive earned that second place, ranking one distracted turn at a time. Number 11. The Tail of the Dragon along the Tennessee-North Carolina line. This stretch of Highway 129 packs 318 curves into just 11 miles, a road that started as a Cherokee footpath, then a Civil War-era passage for bushwhackers, before becoming a paved federal highway in the 1930s. The posted speed limit has been lowered twice over the decades, from 55 down to 40 and finally to 30 miles per hour, and it still isn't enough to stop the crashes. Motorcyclists come from across the country to chase the perfect lean angle. Since 2021, at least 19 people have died here, and local sheriffs say it can take nearly 2 hours to get an injured rider from the roadside to a hospital because of how remote the terrain is. A local shop even displays what riders call the Tree of Shame, hung with broken parts salvaged from crashes past. The road doesn't forgive overconfidence. It just waits for the next rider who thinks he's the exception. Number 10. The Ocoee River, Tennessee. This river hosted the whitewater slalom events at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, and its most infamous rapid still carries the nickname Humongous. For most of the 20th century, the riverbed below the dam sat completely dry. And it wasn't until a maintenance shutdown in 1976 that water accidentally returned, drawing paddlers who fought to keep the flow permanent. It's a dam-controlled river, meaning the Tennessee Valley Authority can send water surging through with very little warning once a release begins. And on a good weekend, more than 750 rafters a day run the same course Olympic athletes once raced. Rafters have drowned here in multiple separate incidents in recent years, some wearing full safety gear and life jackets, pulled under by hydraulics that don't care how many gold medals were won on the exact same water. The river doesn't distinguish between an Olympian and a tourist on vacation. Number 9. New River Gorge, West Virginia, and its sister river, the Gauley. Despite the name, geologists consider the New one of the oldest rivers on the planet, with estimates running as high as 360 million years. And its lower gorge holds Class 4 and 5 rapids with names like the Meat Grinder, a sieve capable of pulling a swimmer under and holding them there. On one weekend alone in September 2023, 2 separate rafters drowned within 48 hours of each other. One swept into an undercut rock at a spot called Shipwreck Rock. The other pulled from the water during a guide training run on the Gauley. The National Park Service lists drowning as the leading cause of death in what is technically America's newest national park, visited by more than 1.5 million people every year who come specifically to challenge that same current. Number 8. Fontana Dam, North Carolina. At 480 feet, this is the tallest dam east of the Rocky Mountains, rushed to completion in under 3 years during World War II to power the aluminum plants feeding the Manhattan Project. 14 construction workers died completing it, and when the reservoir filled, it drowned 9 communities, including towns called Proctor, Forney, Judson, and Bushnell, and forced the relocation of more than 2,000 graves. Engineers later discovered cracking in the dam's face in 1949 and again in the 1970s, caused by a chemical reaction slowly expanding the concrete from the inside out, a flaw that still requires monitoring today. The Appalachian Trail crosses right over the top of it, and hikers call the shelter below the Fontana Hilton, most of them with no idea they're walking across a monument built for speed, not for safety. Number 7. Sand Cave. Inside what's now Mammoth Cave National Park, Kentucky, in January 1925, during an era so competitive among cave owners it earned the nickname the Cave Wars. A local explorer named Floyd Collins was searching for a new passage when his lamp began to fail. On his way out, his foot dislodged a 27-pound rock that pinned him 55 feet underground, and loose gravel buried much of his lower body soon after. The rescue attempt lasted more than 2 weeks and became a national sensation, carried live over the relatively new medium of radio, with as many as 50,000 people gathering outside the entrance, and a reporter earning a Pulitzer Prize for crawling through the tightest passage to interview him. Collins died of exposure before rescuers could reach him in time, and it took his own brother, funded by a vaudeville tour telling his story, to finally recover the body months later. The rock that killed him weighed less than a bag of dog food. The cave never needed anything bigger. Number 6. The 2016 Gatlinburg wildfires, Tennessee. What began as a small blaze near a peak called Chimney Tops grew from 70 acres to more than 17,000 in a matter of hours. Driven by wind gusts recorded at 87 miles per hour during what officials called a near-hurricane force wind event. 14 people died, more than 190 were injured, and more than 2,500 homes and buildings were damaged or destroyed as the fire jumped out of the national park and directly into a town packed with tourists. Water pressure failed at the worst possible moment too, as several pumping stations lost power or burned, leaving fire hydrants running dry across parts of Gatlinburg just as crews needed them most. A federal judge later ruled that the Park Service failed to adequately warn residents before the fire arrived. The mountains that make this region beautiful every October are the same mountains that turned a drought-stressed forest into a chimney every bit as fast that November. Number 5. The Scotia Mine, Oven Fork, Kentucky. On March 9, 1976, a methane explosion tore through this coal mine, killing 15 men almost instantly. 2 days later, as rescue crews and federal mine inspectors went back in to restore ventilation, a second explosion killed 11 more, including 3 of the inspectors themselves. 26 men died in a single week at a mine federal records show had been shut down 110 times for safety violations between 1970 and 1976, and cited 420 times in just the 2 years before the disaster. The average age of the men who died was 27. The mountain didn't just take miners that week. It took the men who came back in to try to save them. Number 4. The Silver Bridge, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. On the evening of December 15, 1967, this suspension bridge over the Ohio River collapsed without warning during rush hour, dropping 46 people into freezing water. 2 of them were never recovered. Unlike most suspension bridges of its era, this one had only a single steel eye-bar chain on each side holding up the deck, with no backup if one link failed. Investigators eventually traced the collapse to a single hairline crack hidden inside one of those eye-bars, just 1/10 of an inch deep, in a spot no visual inspection could ever have caught. That one invisible flaw led directly to the creation of the National Bridge Inspection Standards still used across the country today. Locals now gather every December to remember the victims, and the town has become better known for the Mothman sightings reported near the bridge in the months before it fell than for the tragedy itself. It took a crack the width of a fingernail to prove 40 years of trust wrong. Number 3. Buffalo Creek, West Virginia. On February 26, 1972, a coal waste dam owned by the Pittston Coal Company gave way above a narrow mountain hollow, just 4 days after a federal inspector had declared it satisfactory. In under 3 hours, the resulting wave tore through 17 communities and killed 125 people, including entire families buried together. A citizens' commission later concluded the company was guilty of killing at least 124 of them through flagrant disregard for safety, while Pittston's own public relations office called the disaster an act of God. Survivors eventually settled for roughly $13,000 each after legal fees, out of a lawsuit that had sought tens of millions, and long-term studies later compared the mental health of Buffalo Creek survivors against a nearby coal town that hadn't flooded. This wasn't a flood the mountains created on their own. It was a flood a company built, one shovel of mining waste at a time. Number 2. The Hawk's Nest Tunnel, Gauley Bridge, West Virginia. Between 1930 and 1932, thousands of mostly black migrant workers drilled a 3-mile tunnel through Gauley Mountain for Union Carbide, cutting through rock that was nearly pure silica. Dry drilling filled the tunnel with dust so dense that workers described it as a white cloud they could barely see or breathe through. And many were paid not in cash but in company scrip good only at the company store. At least 764 of them died of acute silicosis, a preventable disease that scars the lungs until they simply stop working. And congressional testimony from the era put the true toll several hundred higher still. Some of the dead were buried in unmarked graves by a company-hired undertaker on a nearby farm. And no proper memorial went up at the site until 2012, 8 decades after the tunnel was finished. It remains the deadliest industrial disaster in American history, and most people driving past the scenic overlook today have never once heard its name. Number 1 isn't a single place at all. It's the ridge that runs through every story on this list, the Appalachian Trail itself. 2. 190 miles of footpath connecting Georgia to Maine, crossing the same mountains, gorges, and rivers we just walked through one by one. Since 1974, more than a dozen murders have been documented along its length, including a 1988 attack on a lesbian couple later recognized as one of the earliest modern hate crime cases in the country, and a 2011 killing that remains unsolved to this day. But the trail's own data tells a different story about what actually kills people here. Falls, drowning, and medical emergencies, far more often than violence, with heart-related deaths topping the list every single year. In 2013, an experienced hiker named Geraldine Largay stepped off the trail for less than a minute to relieve herself and never found her way back. So tell me honestly, did your hometown make this list, or did we somehow leave off the one place every local swears is worse than all 17 of these combined? Drop it in the comments, because these videos genuinely get built from what you tell us we're missing. If this kept you watching all the way to the end, subscribe, because Appalachia isn't running out of stories like these anytime soon.